Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today we're going to be checking out the line of Airlift LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs for the rear axle. And these ones are going to have the internal jounce bumpers. Now being that these are all custom fit for every particular vehicle, you want to be sure to use our fit guide, put in your vehicle's information, and make sure you get the right kit for your particular truck. For those of you that are pulling heavy trailers around or hauling heavy loads, you've probably come to realize that your suspension could use a little bit of help. And that's exactly what these are going to do. Without them, a lot of times you might notice your truck squatting or sagging when you have that load back there. And that's kind of putting unnecessary wear and tear on your suspension components. What a lot of people notice too, myself included, is a lot of increased body roll, meaning when you're hauling that load and you're making those turns, what tends to happen is a vehicle almost feels top heavy, right? So it wants to lean and it's super slow to recover, and it's just not ideal. Don't make for a comfortable towing experience or anything like that. Not to mention too, especially if you tow a lot and your suspension's loaded quite often, that can wear out other parts as well. Your tires won't wear evenly, you get decreased braking performance, so on and so forth. And so by adding a suspension enhancement like this airbag or air spring here, it's going to really help combat all those issues and make your driving experience that much more comfortable. Here's what the air springs can look like once they're installed on your truck. And being that these are all custom fit, your kit might look a little bit different. We have them on an F-250 today, but that's kind of the nice thing with these. All the brackets are going to be made for your particular vehicle. From my experience, we do a lot of these airlift bags here. From my experience, just about any vehicle you put them on, they tend to fit really well. And I feel like compared to some of the other kits out there, that Airlift kind of keeps it simple, right? Which definitely generally makes the installation process a little bit easier. But the way that they're going to work, they just fill the void between the bottom of your frame rail and the top of your axle. You inflate these full of air, and that's how they're going to provide the support and that little bit of extra cushion there, if you will, to keep your truck level and reduce the body roll and help unload the suspension a little bit. You can adjust these from 5 psi all the way up to 100 psi, so you can really dial in to your particular load. If you're hauling something lighter one day, you might need 10 pounds there. If you got something super heavy, you might need 60, 70, 80 plus. A lot of people find themselves somewhere in the middle. That usually seems to be a pretty sweet spot as far as that goes. And these are going to have a load carrying capacity of up to 5,000 pounds. So that's just how much weight the bags can handle. That doesn't mean if you put these on, you're going to increase your truck's overall weight carrying capacity. You do get a lot of questions about people asking if air springs are going to be compatible with in-bed hitches, so your fifth wheels and your goosenecks, things like that. And it makes sense because if you have a trailer that is a gooseneck or a fifth wheel, chances are pretty good. It weighs quite a bit. It makes sense to want an enhancement like this. And the vast majority of the time, I'd say 9 times out of 10, the bags are going to be compatible with them. Good example here today on our Ford, we have the in-bed factory puck system, and ours went up without any issues there. Didn't interfere or anything. I feel like Airlift does a pretty good job of keeping that type of thing in consideration and making their brackets to where they are going to be compatible. So like I said, chances are pretty good. You should be in good shape. And usually if not, you can find that information on the tech tip section on the webpage. There are a couple of different ways you can adjust the pressures in your bags. One of them being just good old manual inflation valves. And how we have it set up, you can adjust each bag individually. So just take your air hose and fill them up to the desired pressure. I want to mention this bracket where I have these mounted. that's not included. This is actually a Firestone bracket that I like to use a lot just because it zip ties to the hitch or another component. But you can always mount these up, a lot of times replace your license plate screws or really get creative. And Airlift has several suggestions that you can do. Or if you don't want to try to get them, if you want to do the manual inflation, but you don't want to try to get them perfect on each side, right? Say you really don't care about individual adjustment. What you can always do is get a T, and let's just say, for example, you'll have the passenger side coming in here, driver side coming in here, and then out of this one line, you can just have one inflation valve. That way, say if you want 50 pounds of air in it, fill it up in that one valve, and 50 pounds of air will go to each bag. So that's always something that you could do, but something really popular and something that I like to always suggest when getting into an airbag or an air spring is the use of a compressor kit, which we actually have one set up on our vehicle today. So why don't we just check that out real quick. It's a wireless one, and this is a good example too, because a lot of people wonder if you can mix and match, brands. You got an Airlift bag, can you use a Firestone compressor, or maybe even vice versa? And the answer is yes. If you end up using a compressor kit, it don't care what brand the bags are. Its only job is to fill them up and let air out. So seems to be a pretty good compressor. Personally, from my experience, I really like the Airlift Wireless One. Easy mount compressors. Had a lot of good luck with them. And that kind of brings you to my next point. So these air springs are going to require that you have at least 5 pounds of air in them at all time. And that's kind of the standard across the board with all different types of air springs to prevent damage and so on and so forth. So a lot of times with these wireless type compressors, you can set it up to where it'll keep a minimum of 5 pounds in there at all times when you're not towing. So, it just prevents you from forgetting or running into any future issues down the road. Airlift does make a couple different styles of these bags. One with internal jounce bumpers, like the kits that we're looking at here today, and some without them. And you might be wondering, well, what's the difference? Because they look pretty similar. Well, the ones that have internal jounce bumpers have something like this. This is just a jounce bumper I had laying around. It's not actually what's inside of here, but just to give you a visual, an example, right? So you'd have something like this inside of the bag. And the reason for that being sometimes, if you can get away with running a little less air in the bag and, rely a little bit more on this for some support if it comes down far enough. But in all honesty, at least in my opinion, these are just there more of as a fail-safe. So if the bag were to potentially leak or something were to happen when you're towing it down the road, the jounce bumper would touch the axle, if you will, and provide support so you don't bottom the suspension out. The ones without the jounce bumpers, you're really not going to get any different performance, if you will. You share a lot of the same features. They're just not going to have a jounce bumper like this one inside of the bag. There are a lot of different styles of suspension enhancements out on the market today. And, generally speaking, they're all going to get the job done and work and everything. What one's going to be best for you is really just going to depend on how you use your vehicle and what you're looking to get out of it. With an airbag or an air spring, kind of a good option across the board. Having that adjustability, you can really dial everything in to that particular trailer or whatever it is that you're going to be hauling around. If you don't like the thought of having to maintain them or adjust that pressure, you're really not looking for that. There's a lot of other different types of things out there too. So for example, a lot of times you can get a Timbren or a Sumo spring. With those, for lack of a better term, they're pretty much just scaled up jounce bumpers, usually pretty easy to replace. And how those work, they kind of give you support, or they give you support when you need it, but don't whenever you're not hooked up, which is convenient. There's no maintenance or nothing to have to deal with. The downside to it though is you don't get that adjustability, right? So when you install an enhancement like that, kind of is what it is. And then on some vehicles too, there's I guess you could say, a leaf spring enhancement. There's some companies that make some that will attach a leaf spring pack, and those are a good middle ground, at least from my experience. A lot of those are somewhat adjustable, still maintain a somewhat comfortable ride, provide that additional support. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, is an air spring or an airbag going to be the best option for you? You know, I feel like that's going to be for you to decide and how you plan on using your vehicle and towing and everything like that. But hopefully today we gave you a little bit of insight and hopefully make that decision a little bit easier on you. But with that said, I think that'll about do it for our look at of the line of Airlift LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs with internal jounce bumpers for the rear axle.